Nama Shreshtam Manumapi Sachiputramatru Swarupam Rupam Tasya Grajam Ruparim Maturim Gostavatam Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhika Madhavasam Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tamna Tosmi Jayam Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Sunda Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. So we are reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, Chapter 2. Chapter 2 of Adi Lila Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is entitled Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Swayam Bhagavan, establishing the supreme, the topmost ontological position of Gauranga Mahaprabhu. In order to do that, as we'll see later, or as we saw earlier in fact, but as we'll see again expressed later, i.e. in the Ramananda Sambad, etc., Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reveals himself and is seen by his intimate devotees as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Radha Krishna Nahi Anna. There's no difference between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Radha Krishna. In other words, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Radha Krishna combined. So in order to establish the supreme ontological position of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you need to establish the supreme ontological position of Krishna. Because if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna, then you need to, whatever Krishna has, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has. So the position of Krishna as Swayam Bhagavan also needs to be established. So we've been through that section where Kaviraj Goswami is addressing the main challenge, at least at that time, to the supremacy of Krishna, and that is that some, or many, would say, oh, the scriptures appear to say that Narayan is supreme and Krishna emanates from Narayan. So Kaviraj Goswami is addressing that misconception and establishing Krishna as Swayam Bhagavan, not for that purpose in itself, but so that then there is a basis on which Mahaprabhu can be understood as Swayam Bhagavan. How do we know this? Because that's the title of the chapter, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Swayam Bhagavan. So we will continue. We left off yesterday at text 114. And the another interesting point from where we were finishing yesterday was that the author, Kaviraj Goswami, he says that even though I am paraphrasing here, even though I am establishing Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Sri Krishna as Swayam Bhagavan, that means occupying the topmost ontological position, the hierarchy of divine forms of the Supreme, Krishna is seen as the original and topmost. So, even if you cannot appreciate that, even if you see Krishna as the incarnation of Kiradakshaya Vishnu, or directly Nara Narayan, these are examples given by the author. He says that is okay, because Krishna is also that. Krishna is also those, can also be, should he choose. It may not be the deepest, truest conception, but still it's truthful in its own relative way. So that's okay for the time being. It's not necessarily wrong. And we see this also in the same way with Gauranga Mahaprabhu. The point was being made yesterday that although the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita establishes the deepest, truest conception of Gauranga Mahaprabhu is expressed in the Ramananda Samvad and in Radha Bhava, the verse by Swarup Damodar, Radha Bhava Duti Suvalitam Nomi Krishna Swarupam, that not everyone can appreciate that. And that too, in a sense, is okay. As Kaviraj Goswami says it's okay for Krishna, and so it's also okay for Mahaprabhu. Not everyone is necessarily able to appreciate the deepest identity of Gauranga Mahaprabhu is Radha Krishna Milita Tanu, Radha Krishna combined. Radha Shama Ekatanu. Same thing. Radha Krishna combined. They may see Mahaprabhu as some other divine, in some other divine context, as some other divine identity. And that's okay. That may fit them. That may evoke their devotion for now. It will not be the highest devotion, but devotion nonetheless is to be appreciated, and in time it can grow. And the point was made that in the Chaitanya Bhagavat we don't see Mahaprabhu being described as Radha Krishna combined. We see other visions, conceptions. Are they illegitimate? No. Are they the topmost? No. So we have something that's not the topmost, but also not illegitimate, so it's okay. So this is the point that Kaviraj Goswami left off with yesterday, that we finished with yesterday. So we will begin here from text 116. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Sabha Shrota Ganera Kari Charana Bandhana E Sabha Siddhanta Shuna Kari Ekamana. I offer my obeisances unto the feet of all who hear or read this discourse. Kindly hear with attention the conclusion of all these statements. So it seems the chapter is coming to an end, which it is. So wrapping up his argument. Purport: prostrating himself at the feet of his readers, the author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita entreats them in all humility to hear with rapt attention these conclusive arguments regarding the absolute truth. One should not fail to hear such arguments, because only by knowledge can one perfectly know Krishna. Siddhanta baliya chite nakara alasa iha haite Krishna lage sudridha manasa. A sincere student should not neglect the discussion of such conclusions, considering them controversial, for such discussions strengthen the mind. Thus one's mind becomes attached to Sri Krishna. Jai Shri Gurudev, Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhu. Not that this is a license for troublemaking. This verse has indeed in the past been quoted in the wrong context to justify indulgence in controversial gossip. Siddhanta baliya chite nakara alasa iha haite Krishna lage sudridha manasa. A sincere student should not neglect the discussion of such conclusions, considering them controversial, for such discussions strengthen the mind. Thus one's mind becomes attached to Krishna. Of course, the discussion in question is the relationship in regards to who occupies the ontologically superior position between Krishna and Narayan. And thus, by extension, whether Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu occupies the position of Swayam Bhagavan. So that's the controversy in question. And Kaviraj Goswami is saying, not just in relation to this, but in relation to other philosophical questions which may be considered controversial. He's saying, don't shy away from them. Don't shy away from discussing them in an endeavor to reach a correct conclusion. He says, one's mind can become attached to Krishna in the process, which means that they will have a productive, desirable result. Again, we have a caveat. It says, a sincere student. So, in all of these pursuits, whether they be considered conservative or controversial, sincerity is required. We came across that also a few verses back. In regards to some topic. We'll read some of the purport. There are many students who, in spite of reading Bhagavad Gita, misunderstand Krishna because of imperfect knowledge and conclude him to be an ordinary historical personality. This one must not do. He's saying this is unacceptable. One should be particularly careful to understand the truth about Krishna. If because of laziness one does not come to know Krishna conclusively, one will be misguided about the cult of devotion, like those who declare themselves advanced devotees and imitate the transcendental symptoms sometimes observed in liberated souls. Although the use of thoughts and arguments is a most suitable process for inducing an uninitiated person to become a devotee, neophytes in devotional service must always alertly understand Krishna through the vision of the revealed scriptures, the bona fide devotees, and the spiritual masters, and the spiritual master. Unless one hears about Sri Krishna from such authorities, one cannot make advancement in devotion to Sri Krishna. So Prabhupada's purports are very practical, because he was aware of his preaching context. It was unprecedented. And his audience, his recruits, converts, they were from a demographic or from a social group that, or from a part of the world, amongst people that they hadn't come from a culture in which there was a kind of a subconscious understanding of what was expected of them. There was already a basis of an understanding of what was required. But his students, they had come from a completely foreign culture. So he wants to make sure here. So in his purports, he's addressing some very practical concerns related to their initial development. So he wants to make sure here that this statement by Kaviraj Goswami says it's good to discuss these things, even if they're considered controversial. He's wanting to make sure it's not used as a license just to start bickering and arguing. And he's making the point that, yes, it's okay, but if you want the truth, you need to hear it from revealed scriptures and bona fide devotees and the spiritual master. Prabhu, maybe can you turn on that light? I forgot to turn it on. Just this light here. This one just here. Yeah. I'm not sure if it really makes a difference, but it's supposed to be on, isn't it? Text 118. Chaitanya mahima jani e sabha siddhante chittadriddha hanalage mahima jnana haite. By such conclusive studies, I know the glories of Lord Chaitanya. Only by knowing these glories can one become strong and fixed in attachment to him. Purport: one can know the glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu only by reaching in knowledge a conclusive decision about Sri Krishna, strengthened by bona fide study of the conclusions of the Acharyas. Chaitanya Prabhura Mahima Kahi Bharatare Krishnera Mahima Kahi Kariya Vistare. Just to enunciate the glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I've tried to describe the glories of Krishna in detail. So there we have it. He's explaining why he is going into depth, constructing this hypothetical, rhetorical discussion between himself and the Purva Paksha, the opponent, regarding the position of Krishna. And he says, it is just to enunciate the glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Goshanira e Tattva Nirupana Swayam Bhagavan Krishna Brajendra Nandana. The conclusion is that Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, the son of the king of Braja. Sri Rupa Raghunatha Pade Yada Asa Chaitanya Charitamrita Kahi Krishna Dasa. Praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, always desiring their mercy, I, Krishna Das, narrate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, following in their footsteps. And of course, that verse marks the end of the chapter, entitled Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or Swayam Bhagavan. So we have chapter 3. We begin chapter 3 tomorrow. Chapter 3.
What is the term Swayam? Swayam, how is translated?
Swayam. It's kind of from the term Swarup. But it's doesn't literally mean original, but Swayam is like the original form. It means that which is the proper form or the true form. We have the word Svarup, comes from the same same word, same linguistic origin. Svarup, Swayam. Swarup means a form. So Swayam Bhagavan means, say, the true or original form of Bhagavan. That's
one who possesses 6.
Yeah, full opulences. Bhagavan. Bhagavana. Vana means a forest or a great quantity, and Bhaga means wealth. But in its, we can try and understand literally what the words mean. We may not get a true picture, may or may not get a clear idea. But the practical meaning, or the meaning in which it's used, Swayam Bhagavan, simply means the original form. The original form of the Lord, Swayam Bhagavan. The form from which all other forms originate.
Because from the perspective of a practitioner, they see the highest expression of divinity in Krishna, yet his associates in Vrindavan, same as him, they don't know that he is Bhagavan. He cries when he runs away from his mother. He feels weakness. He feels fear, and then in a way he's not possessing per se those qualities that would make him supreme personality like Bhagavan.
Of course.
He's higher. So in that context, the term Bhagavan, it appears to be more applicable to Vishnu or Narayana, who takes that position, official position.
Yes, unless we are to deem the Madhura Ras also as a type of wealth. The wealth of sweet wealth. And why not? Because if we to explore what these bhaga are, we have six items, and one of them is beauty, and it is the beauty of Krishna on which this Madhura Ras is based. So it is one opulence, and to appreciate that beauty, then a certain elimination of the other opulences need to take place. In order to appreciate sweetness and intimacy, then you need to get rid of power. Because when you have power when you have a power disparity, or a massive difference in power between two parties, you can never really have intimacy. You can never really have intimacy generally speaking, between a king and a subject. But when the king goes home and is divested of his power, he's not acting all powerful at home, then he can have a sweet relationship with his consort, or a vatsalya rasa relationship with his children, because there's no power play at home. So the other opulences have to go into the background in order for the beauty to come out. And you could say vice versa, like, how beautiful and charming can the king be when he has to exercise his power? Not so much. There needs to be a dasya-rasa relationship where people are bowing down and submitting to that power, not a sweet, intimate relationship of sakya, vatsalya, or madhura. So others, there's still much opulence there, but it's just of an extreme and exclusive sweet variety. All of the other opulences need to retire into the background for that to express itself in the Vrindavan Leela. And you could say, well, what makes that superior to, an expression of power, or an expression of strength, or an expression of knowledge, omniscience, which are these other opulences? You say, because of the enjoyment obtained, because of the rasa. This is how Rupa Goswami measures it. The intimacy, the sweetness of the relationship, you find it becomes more exclusive. Many may have a dasya rasa relationship, but not many have a madhura rasa relationship. You could say, I like this example of the head of state. You have a king, or you have a president, or whatever. A very powerful person. You say they're kind of akin to God because they're the most powerful person in the land. How many people have a madhura rasa relationship with them? Not many. How many people have a dasya rasa relationship? Many, many people. So it can be understood in that way. And the measure of rasa, measuring rasa, using rasa as a metric to understand the supremacy of a relationship with the Lord, that is Rupa Goswami's introduction to the world. Measuring one's relationship with the Supreme based on the flavor and the intensity of the rasa that is generated. And that various relationships can be categorically organized in a hierarchical fashion based on that rasa, based on the rasa that characterizes them. So still Swayam Bhagavan, but with the other opulences that you could say, by their presence, they diminish the pure and extreme expression of beauty, which is that on which Madhura Rasa is based, beauty and love. They need to retire somewhat into the background. And conversely, with the power of Narayan, then the sweetness of Madhura Rasa the beauty the charm has to retire into the background, or it's not there. We can keep in mind the point just being made as well, that if one cannot appreciate the Madhura Rasa, that does not mean they have to give up completely, throw the baby out with the bathwater. As he says, various conceptions of the Lord are fine. He says you can see Krishna as an incarnation of Narayan, the man God, man Narayan from Satya Yuga. Narayan. And I think some consider that Narayan to be the white incarnation of Satya Yuga, described by Garga Muni at the time of Krishna's birth. Satya Yuga, he appears as white. Or he says you can see Krishna as an expansion of Kiradakshai Vishnu. Kiradakshai Vishnu is the Paramatma. He says that's okay. So he's not dismissing that. The situation here in the second chapter is that he's constructed a hypothetical argument. He's defeated his hypothetical opponent. But then he's giving a concession. And he's saying, all right, I've defeated your position by recourse to Shastra. But he's saying, but still, even though your position has been clarified as, showing up to be not the highest conclusion, still, he says, you can have less than perfect conclusions. That's okay. It's kind of like in the Second World War, when America defeats Japan and Germany to an extent, helped to defeat Germany. Then they go, all right, now you can have all of this to rebuild. We see the economies of Japan and Germany soon become flourishing amongst the most powerful economies in the world. Number 2 and number 3. Yet just a few decades before, they were crushed to dust. So he's crushed his opponent and he goes, all right, but that's okay, you can have all of this. Not quite an accurate example, but nonetheless, he's giving concessions after having defeated the opponent, saying, yes, if you need to, you can see Krishna in this way. After having established that it's not the supreme vision, not the supreme revelation, but he's saying it's okay if you need to. And if we dig a little deeper, we may conclude that this is because it's better to have some faith than no faith. If this is what you need in order to establish your faith, then you can run with that for now, with the expectation that your faith will grow and your conception will deepen, your vision will deepen as you continue your practices, as you continue to build your faith. But if you throw out your faith completely, going, I cannot have the highest visions, I'll have no vision at all, that's unproductive. So he's giving a concession so that people's faith will be preserved, if that's what they need. We see the same practically today, and it's a good position to hold. It's a good principle to keep in mind when shaping or when wondering what kind of position or perspective we should have on various groups. They may not hold the highest position in terms of their understanding of Bhakti Tattva, their understanding of who is carrying the Rupanuga Dhara, the current of Rupa Goswami. They may not have the proper, clear or highest conception of the teachings of Mahaprabhu and Rupa Goswami, may be somewhat polluted. But even so, when I say polluted, I don't mean actively practicing sahajism or something. Their appreciation may not be razor sharp. But even so, if it is what they need to do for the time being to preserve their faith, then it's okay. It shouldn't be smashed. It shouldn't be dealt with too harshly. People can have there's all sorts of conceptions out there. If it's building one's faith, then for the time being, it may be okay for them. It may be what they need. It may be a step. Best to take step 1 than no step at all.
It can't be universally established, though, as a level, so to say.
As an ideal?
Yeah.
No. There needs to be at least one, somewhere needs to be, it needs to be established that the Siddhanta in its pristine form, superlative, untainted, it needs to be established, it needs to be protected. And of course, that is why we feel so privileged to follow Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, who is If anyone is such, then he is the preeminent protector of the sampradaya, and that's known as Bhakti Rakshak, protector of the Rupanugadara, the spiritual current of Rupa Goswami. And that is the specialty of the Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Math. We don't indulge in all kinds of other practices or conceptions that may appeal to various people, various stages, various places. Our identity is one of quality, protection of quality, which is a very important function. In fact, considering that the whole environment is antithetical to the spiritual substance, it is the most important function. Whenever the spiritual substance enters the material domain, enters the Maya Shakti, then it immediately begins a process towards extinction. It's kind of like an animal or a species of plant going into a hostile environment. It immediately begins a journey towards extinction. And so we are like the curators of the rare plant that is in danger of extinction. That's how I like to see it. There's people that need to protect it, create an environment in which that which is under threat of extinction, constantly under attack, constantly being eroded, that needs to be preserved and cultured. Kind of like taking an endangered species and cultivating it, breeding it in a protected environment. So we'll read from Devotional Treasure Chest by Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj. I was talking yesterday about Satyam Shivam Sundaram. Satyam, truth, Shivam, auspiciousness, Sundaram, beauty. Progressive stages of spiritual realization and achievement. Very soon, researchers are going to prove that their science devours itself. The civilization already created by it sucks its own blood. Modern man is feeding on the flesh of his own friends and of himself. Material science and knowledge means only this. But this is not knowledge. Real knowledge must absorb yourself and others in eternal life, full knowledge and peaceful existence. This is our conception. This is what Gurudev has given to us. Our Guru Maharaj came to spread this sort of knowledge, and we came hankering. Hungrily, we felt ourselves looking for such things. Still, I am engaged in that sort of quest. And that should be the real life for one and all who are in this mundane world. There should not be any other quest or any other engagement. There should be nothing of the kind. Then that will be real life. And renunciation is not the remedy. That is the next point. The Buddhists and Shankarites say, yes, renunciation is the remedy. Leave everything. But the Vaishnavas come with a third proposal. They know living in the land of exploitation is temporary, but one cannot exist without engagement. Only renunciation means withdrawal, to return to zero. That is not desirable. So the Vaishnavas say that there is a land of dedication, and that is normal, where every unit is a dedicating unit, and dedication must be towards the center. Our identity is Atma, not mind or mundane intelligence, but transcending all these things, our real conception is the soul, and it has some relationship with the subtler realm. That relationship is dedication. Now, of course, Param Gurudeva's dedication is synonymous with bhakti. Dedication means bhakti, as we were talking about yesterday. Exploitation is bhukti. Dedication is renunciation is mukti, and dedication is bhakti. Bhukti, mukti, bhakti. And they are all mutually exclusive. That is, they cannot live with each other. Where one is present, the other two cannot live. So, bhukti cannot live with mukti or bhakti, and mukti cannot live with bhukti or bhakti, and bhakti cannot live with mukti or bhukti. They all must live individually. So wherever one is being cultured, the other two cannot live there. To the degree that one exists in one's consciousness, is to the same conversely, to the converse degree, the others cannot stay there. And thus, quoting the verse, Bhukti mukti spriha javat pisacha hridivartate, tavad bhakti sukasyatra katam abhyudayo bhavet. When those two are in the heart, because they can't really be in the heart together, because you can't renounce and exploit at the same time. But if either one is in the heart, then bhakti cannot be there, which is establishing exactly that they cannot live together. The good aspect of that being that if you cultivate bhakti, then naturally there will be no bhukti, exploitation, or mukti, renunciation, living in your heart.
How harmonizes in Yukta Vairagya? So you renounce things which are unnecessary for spiritual practice, and yet you take certain things which are favorable. So there's taking element and renouncing element, but somehow it's harmonized in devotion.
Yeah. Well, theoretically, in Yukta Vairagya, everything can be used in Krishna's service. It's just a matter of whether you have capacity to use it. So, for some person, an act may be Yukta Vairagya, but for another person, it's not. So, yeah, one person is not. When you say renounce it simply means you're not qualified to use it. It doesn't mean that the item itself is intrinsically incapable of being used. It just means that you're not qualified to use it. So, Yukta Vairagya does not apply equally to everyone. It's not one size fits all for everyone. It's Yukta Vairagya as a concept, but its application must be tailor-made. For every person, there's a prescription, a Yukta Vairagya prescription that differs from person to person. So how do you assess whether you're able to use a particular item or not? Well, do you have the right to do it? And do you have the ability to do it? Do you have the ability to use something in Krishna's service? So, for instance, you may say, I want to buy a Ferrari and use it in Krishna's service. Well, maybe you could if you have if you're in a situation where you could use a Ferrari. I don't know, we could think about it. Surely you could find a way to use a Ferrari in Krishna's service. A Rolls Royce, yeah. So some people were using Rolls Royces to ferry Prabhupada around. You say that's okay. Maybe you could overdo it, perhaps. That would show that you're not qualified. Like, who is the other fellow? Osho, with 80 Rolls Royces or something. But yes, you can use opulence in the service of Guru. That's certainly acceptable and recommended to glorify the Guru. And not all gurus, of course. There are nuances to the concept, but a sincere and qualified disciple is able to understand what types of service are appropriate. So yeah, in certain services, in certain contexts, you can ferry your guru around in a Rolls Royce, or you can take, as they do, they take at the ISKCON Rath Yatra, they take Jagannath Subhadra Baladev to the carts and fancy cars. You could use a Rolls Royce for that. But if you go out and buy a Rolls Royce and say, I'm going to use it in Krishna's service, you have to make sure that you're actually qualified to use it in Krishna's service. You have the ability to and the right to. Because otherwise, you may just be doing it so that you can have the prestige of driving an expensive car. Or, I want to buy a latest model smartphone, use it in Krishna's service. Or a very expensive computer. But if you don't know how to use computers, then you don't have the ability to use it in Krishna's service. Whereas the other fellow, who's a techie, he can use it in Krishna's service. So for one person it's not appropriate. They need to renounce that desire to have the computer. But for the other person, they can buy the computer and they can use it in Krishna's service. So Yukta Vairagya is not just one size fits all. Just because one person can use a particular item doesn't mean other people can.
It's quite hard to actually understand what's acceptable in your particular case.
Well, you have to be honest with yourself. With sincerity, you will be guided. Sincerity gives proper vision. Gurudev would say sincerity is the steel of the devotee, meaning the strength of the devotee. So your strength will be maintained. The strength of your position will be maintained if you're sincere. Whereas if you're insincere, your strength will diminish as a result of things like the misapplication of Yukta Vairagya. You will do things that are not in your best interest spiritually because you're insincere. You're not actually honestly wanting the real thing. You're pretending that you do, but your sincerity lacks. So your real desires are for something else. Yukta Vairagya. Yeah, I mean, it's not too difficult. Most of us know, if we have a modicum of sincerity, what we can and can't use in spiritual life. And generally, if you can use the old axiom, if in doubt, do without, in Yukta Vairagya. If you're doubting whether you'll be able to use it or not, can I go and use this expensive new luxury item in Krishna's service? I'm not quite sure. Then probably not. I don't see, some people say, it's difficult to know, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's quite easy. Give some examples of how you think it might be difficult.
Well, because in the attempt to use something for the service, thinking that might be good, you could use that for your own benefit, or you learning something about something, or improving your understanding of some, I don't know, you start, for example, you study in deep IT course to understand how AI functions.
Yes.
You can later set up the library and upload there all the books.
Yes.
And make it as such that you could, in a simple request, get the feedback of all the shastras written down the line. So that's a very good idea, very nice and appealing idea. But then on the other hand, you're thinking maybe you just want to learn all the mechanisms behind it and see how that works. So later you can use that knowledge to benefit itself. So because it's enough good excuse to actually do that because it's a good idea. But then on the other hand, you're thinking maybe there is some tinge of desire of learning.
Yeah, it could be mixed.
So
I mean, it's not too difficult because then you would ask, have you been asked to do that? Have you been tasked with it as a service? Or if you're in the Grihastha ashram, and you needed to develop a skill to support yourself, then you can go and do that, and perhaps at some later stage, or along with that, you can use it to develop an indexed search engine or an archive or whatever it is you're describing. So it's not too much, but if you're going, don't delude yourself. I've seen, growing up in spiritual organizations, I've seen people go, I'm going to, a typical one is academia. They'll say, oh, I'm going to go and get a advanced academic degree. I'm going to go get my doctorate, my PhD. And then people will listen to me, you see. They'll listen to what I have to say because I'm a PhD. That means I can preach very effectively. So I'm going to go out first, I'm going to get academically qualified, and then I'm going to go out and convert the world. But generally what happens is that in the process of getting themselves academically qualified, they get converted by the academic environment. If we were to honestly analyze that statement, oh, I'm going to go to university, I'm going to get my PhD, and then I'm going to really preach to all the intelligent people of the world, or and the less intelligent people will listen to me because of the letters after my name. If we analyze that, we will find that there may be some desire to do so. There may be some belief that doing so will enhance their preaching. But we will also come to the conclusion that if someone does want to preach, they won't be able to stop themselves. They will go out and do it anyway. They won't see that I have to do this before I can do that. If someone really wants something, if they're pulled to it, they'll go and do it. It's kind of like with ashram, so anyone can put on brahmachari or sannyas cloth. But unless they're really pulled to it naturally, that actual inner condition won't be there. So if someone is really attracted to preaching, they're going to go and preach whether they have academic qualification or not. So the academic qualification may support it, but without the actual desire to preach, then the preaching is not going to happen.
There's some tinge of desire of recognition by others in a particular way.
But the point being made here is that the internal pull, the internal desire, that is the chief, that is the key factor. Everything is hinging on that. So if you have a desire to serve, then you will be guided as to how to serve. Dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upajantite. Tesham satata yuktan. You know the verse, right? Tesham satata yuktanam. Chatusloki. Bhajatam pritipurvakam. Dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upajantite. For those that are, essentially the gist of the verse is that for those that are sincere, I show them how to come to me. So for those that are sincere, they will be guided as to how to apply yukta vairagya. They won't cheat themselves. They won't delude themselves. So to the degree that you're insincere, again, to that same degree, you will be unable to effectively apply the yukta vairagya concepts. Because without sincerity, what do you have? Insincerity. You're applying it insincerely. So someone's saying, oh, I'm going to go get a high academic qualification and preach. We're not judging anyone here. Some people do that. We're not saying that that's an illegitimate ambition. But I'm saying that in most cases, from what I've seen, it doesn't tend to work. So the person has to actually honestly analyze their sincerity in that regard and go, why am I doing this actually? I may be telling people it's for this reason, but is it actually for that reason? So I may be, saying that I'm going to educate myself in IT to create a database or a search engine, but actually it's, so I can get a well-paying job. So as long as you're honest with yourself, you shouldn't fall into any trouble when attempting to apply yukta vairagya theory in your life. Because nothing is out of bounds, almost nothing. But it's just whether you have the qualification to use it. And the qualification begins with sincerity. You will know whether you have it or not if you're sincere. You will know. It's not too difficult, I don't think. But the qualification varies. For instance, Siddhanta Saraswati was prepared to serve meat. In fact, he did actually have meat at the banquet that they prepared for John Anderson, who was the governor of Bengal. They had meat there available for him to eat. So that was based on the yukta vairagya principle, him doing that, utilizing everything in service. Whereas others couldn't do that. If others tried to do that, then they wouldn't be able to effectively pull it off. They wouldn't be able to use it to do that constructively. He was also going to start a hostel. He wanted to start a hostel here in London for students. And he said he would serve meat there if necessary to have them stay. He wanted to serve meat there so that they would stay. Of course, in today's world, we probably wouldn't need to do that if someone wanted to start a hostel and preach in that way. So, the more difficult something is to use is another consideration. More difficult it is to use it in service, then the more qualified one needs to be to use it. The more rare is the qualification to be able to handle that energy. Of course, now John Anderson didn't actually end up eating the meat. I remember reading someone said, they got the Kali worshippers in Navadvip to cook the meat. That's not true at all. It was made in a hotel in Calcutta. But he didn't eat the meat because at that time he was concerned about being poisoned. So he wasn't really eating any food prepared from anyone but his own staff. But that's my opinion. I feel it applies personally, that I can know if I honestly assess my desires in regards to something, I will know why I'm doing it. Whether it's, for yukta vairagya, in other words, whether it's for service or whether it's for some other purpose. And I don't see why others shouldn't be able to. Sincerity, you can look at yourself and go, is my desire here sincere? Or is it for another reason, another purpose? Yukta vairagya. You have to have the right to do it, and you have to have the qualification to do it. You may not have the right to do it. Have you been asked to do it? And then if you've been asked to do it, then you can do it.
Sometimes the necessary services are not articulated, or sometimes it can be the opposite of what you've been actually asked. Like with the case of Bhakti Saraswati Thakur, he was told to preach anywhere but Calcutta.
Don't go to Calcutta. That's what I've heard.
Like you can preach anywhere, but don't go there. This is the worst place. That's exactly the opposite. So it's not always.
We have to understand the context of that statement. Otherwise, it's unexplainable. We have to understand what the context was. I believe there's a context which will shed more light on it. Otherwise, how do we explain it? His Guru says, don't go to Calcutta, and he goes to Calcutta.
I think of a more close connection with Guru, that it stops being about the direct thing, being asked to do or not to do, but you know.
Well, he may have said it once. You see, these things from a long time ago, and sometimes people like to talk about controversial stuff that shocks other people or that can't be initially understood. And they like to leave it that way, which is a bit devious. It's mischievous. Why did Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj tell Saraswati Thakur not to go to Calcutta? It may have been that he was planning a trip to Calcutta. It may have been that he was saying, I want to go and do such and such in Calcutta for a while. He said, don't go to Calcutta. We see this today in all of these Gurudev said and Prabhupada said, and a complete ignoring of the context and taking what was a very context-based instruction that was applicable to a particular specific set of circumstances, a specific time, a specific person, a specific environment, a specific circumstance, a very specific instruction, and they're taking it and they're trying to apply it as a non-specific, broad, timeless, non-circumstantial, non-person specific instruction. But it wasn't designed that way at all. So we have to be a little careful of that. It's a widespread problem, actually, where people take specific instructions that are designed, that are given in relation to very particular circumstances. They wrestle it outside of that. They drag it outside of that specific application, and they try and use it broadly. And generally, that's for their own purpose. But, it's not designed that way at all. So why, in what circumstance was this instruction given? We don't know. I can't comment further on that particularly. But yeah, maybe, even if one is not asked to do something, one should know what to do if one is sincere. Sincerity is the guiding principle. With sincerity, you can't go wrong. So it may not be glamorous to say, well, you need to cultivate your sincerity. You may want to find some kind of intellectual mechanism where you can decide, how to judge something, the usage of something, whether it's appropriate according to Yukta Vairagya principle. But ultimately, it's sincerity. Yes, it's not glamorous because it requires work on your heart. You have to purify your heart in order to obtain some sincerity. But with that sincerity, you will not be making any wrong choices. You will be guided properly, including in terms of how and if you're qualified to use the resources of the environment in the Yukta Vairagya fashion. Applied renunciation. It's not difficult for the sincere person. For the person that's mixed up with other motive, then it can be a little difficult. Am I using this for Krishna's service or am I using it for my own service? Should we finish there? Any further comments? Jai Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sri Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Do you want to sing, Prabhu? Hari Harai Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha. Hari Harai Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha. Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha. Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudana. Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudana. Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohana. Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Chandra. Shri Guru Gauranga Sundar Radha Giridhara Ki Jai, Jai Vishnu Pachal Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Jai Vishnu Pachal Bhakti Rakha Sri Hare Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Bhagavan Shri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai, Shri Rupa Guru Bharata Ki Jai, Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Vishvavaranya Shri A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai, Samaveda Vaishnava Mandala Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai, Sri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Jai Gopranam Hari Hari Bol. Jai.